The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi all, this is Christina. I am the Communications and Marketing Manager here at NYLA. You might have seen the chat, but just make sure that you are all muted. You'll be muted for the entire duration. If you have any questions, make sure to utilize the chat. I'll be monitoring that on Maria's behalf. And we have two separate sections for questions, so we will let you know once we will be answering those questions. So welcome to today's webinar on charitable planned giving as a fundraising tool, presented by Maria Bucci and also sponsored by the Friends of Library section. As I said before, my name is Christina. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager here at NYLA, and I'll be serving as the host this afternoon. I first just want to thank Maria for joining us today. A little brief bio on Maria. So Maria is a fundraising professional with more than 30 years of experience raising funds for charitable organizations. She currently serves as a development specialist for Wood Library, an association library in Canandaigua, New York. I had it spelled out, however, it was still a difficult name. I apologize. A position she has held since 2006. She has raised over $1.2 million for the Wood Library's operating budget through an annual fund drive. She creates opportunities for donors to include Wood Library in their charitable giving plans and helps to plan and carry out multiple fundraising events throughout the year. Maria is a passionate promoter of community libraries, has participated in legislative advocacy days for both the New York Library Association and the American Library Association, and she has championed community-based funding for Wood Library. Maria also serves as the library's grant writer and played a supporting role in securing $4 million for Wood Library during its New Chapter Capital campaign. Her email signature includes the phrase, "Build a legacy, include the Wood Library in your estate plans." And yeah, so without further ado, we will begin the recording. We already started, and I'm also going to hand over to Maria. And just to note, if you have any questions during the duration, please put it in the chat. I'll be monitoring that for you all and for Maria. All right, Maria, take it away.
Thank you, Christina, and welcome everyone. Today is June 9th from beautiful Canandaigua, New York. And Christina, don't worry, that's a hard word for everyone. I want to thank the Friends of the Library section of NYLA for presenting this opportunity for all of you today. I'm also really happy to know that there are some familiar friends participating in this webinar. I know that I believe Rebecca Foos from the Friends and Foundation of Rochester Public Library is participating, as well as my friends Tim Niver and Jessica Pritchard from the Victor Farmington Library, which is right up the road from Canandaigua and one of the member libraries of our system, the Pioneer Library System. So thank you for joining us today. I also know that Lisa Wimette is online, and Lisa invited me to present today. This presentation is an outgrowth of a talk that I gave at the NYLA conference in Saratoga this past November as one of 3 panelists on a program called Fundraising Beyond Book Sales. And my part of the panel was to talk about charitable planned giving, and there did seem to be quite a bit of interest in this topic. And so Lisa asked if I'd be willing to tackle a webinar, an hour-length presentation. And I said, well, I've never done that before, but why not? So here we are, a few months later, talking about charitable planned giving as a fundraising tool for libraries. So I also just want to acknowledge, I know that some of you are directors of libraries, library leaders, either friends leaders or trustees, and this is such a challenging time. And also today, I think, is an important, was going to be an important day for many libraries, being that it was election day for many of us, and that vote has been postponed until next Tuesday. So I know that you have a lot on your plates, and to take some time out at this time to consider fundraising for your library is really important, and I'm so glad that you are with us. Okay, next slide, Christina. So today, this is going to be a two-part presentation. The first part is going to be to give you a little bit lay of the land on philanthropy in the United States at this moment, and to talk a little bit in general terms about fundraising and fundraising tactics. And the second portion, we're really going to focus in on charitable plan giving, and I'm going to use some examples from Wood Library's experience to guide us through that portion of the presentation. But really, my goal today is to inspire you to think about new ways to raise money for your library, and to encourage you to apply at least one new tactic in your fundraising toolbox this year. Honestly, the key thing with charitable plan giving is to plant seeds in your supporters' minds for your library. So when they are considering legacy gifts, they think of your library among their charitable concerns. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share this slide with you. Giving USA is the longest running and most comprehensive report on philanthropy in America. And they collect data every year about the sources of donations and then report it back. This pie chart is reflecting data from 2018. The 2019 data is supposed to be released next week, so be looking for that. I always enjoy taking a look at that report. It does provide some insights from year to year on trends in philanthropy and how things might be reflecting the environment in your community. So the point I wanted to make with this slide, which would be true with any report that's come out of Giving USA for a very long time, is that the vast majority of gifts that are made in any given year in the United States come from individuals. And when you take the number of gifts from individuals and add that with bequests, you're getting close to 85% of all gifts coming from individuals in any given year. So individuals are consistently the largest source of charitable donations. And this is why activities cultivating individuals and building relationships with individual donors are just so critical for your organization. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share some headlines with you from 2019 and from 2020. And as you take a look at those headlines, there shouldn't be anything that surprises you there. Back in actually at the end of 2018, you may remember that there were some pretty significant changes made to tax law at the federal level. Most significant for charities were the changes to tax policy that had to do with a standard deduction. So the standard deduction was doubled, and there was quite a bit of concern that charitable gifts would drop significantly in 2019 because fewer people were going to be itemizing their deductions. So in 2017, 30% of Americans itemized on their tax return, and that was down to 10% last year with the 2018 tax returns. But the interesting thing is, although total charitable giving was down significantly, donors were really looking for new and smart ways to give so that they could get some tax relief. And that's why charitable plan giving offers so many wonderful opportunities. And as an organization that is reliant on private support, we must be prepared when donors approach us with some interest in charitable gifts. The other thing that has happened in 2019 and into 2020 is that there's been a real surge in interest in gifts from individual retirement accounts. Qualified charitable distributions actually doubled from 2017 to 2018, and it is the fastest growing segment of charitable giving. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those are later. The other thing that's happening in philanthropy right now is that innovation is really driving online giving, and more people are comfortable with making recurring donations, for example, monthly donations, or setting up a schedule of donations. And this is so important to sustainability for your library. So next slide, please. Here are some of the headlines from 2020, mostly through April. I don't have to remind you that we are in a pandemic, we are having an economic crisis, and now we're having civil unrest, leading to incredible uncertainty at every level of our economy, in all of our libraries, across our communities. But the interesting thing, and surveys that have been done at other critical crisis moments in our history have bore this out, that when we are going through difficult times, Americans step up. So giving has really not contracted. And I'm wondering if you've experienced some anecdotal evidence of that in your own communities. We've heard here in Canandaigua that people are turning over their stimulus checks to their favorite charities. At Wood Library, I have been blown away at the response that we have gotten to a recent solicitation that we put out. We actually typically send out a mailing in June to all of our donors. We moved it up a month, and the response has been incredible. We're actually $20,000 ahead of where we were last year this time. So one of the other things that's going on in this crazy time that we're living in is that all of us are evolving. We're adapting. We're using all sorts of new approaches to connecting with the people who support our libraries. And we know that our library patrons and our donors are really eager to hear news from us. So I just wanted to anecdotally tell you that prior to March 1st, I had never heard of Zoom before. And now I am using Zoom multiple times a week for meetings, to connect with supporters. We're at our library, and I'm sure your library is doing the same thing. We're using all sorts of virtual platforms for virtual programs. We're promoting our digital services in ways that we never have before. We're sending out more emails. We're using social media in a way that we've never used before. Wood Library actually is now on TikTok, believe it or not. And I'm personally not on TikTok, but our teen services librarian is on TikTok every week. And it's really incredible how quickly everyone has adapted to the new reality. And again, all of the organizations that track giving across the country are showing that there are record levels of giving and larger gifts happening right now all over the country. So all of us need to be prepared for that, and we need to not stop our fundraising, but actually embrace all of the new ways that people want to give to our libraries. There is a significant amount of interest in planned gifts, especially bequests and donor advised funds, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. The other thing I just wanted to mention, there is some early evidence that virtual events are actually generating more income this year than the in-person events that we've all been slaves to for many years. So that's pretty interesting stuff. Next slide, please. So I just want to go over really quickly the different types of charitable gifts. There's really two buckets for charitable giving. And I want you to think beyond cash and book sales here. The first three items on the list, cash, retirement assets, and securities or stocks, are the typical types of gifts that people give in any given year in response to our solicitations, in response to our membership drives. And it's really the second bucket of bequests and real estate, life insurance, trust, and annuities that we're going to be talking about today. And what I want you to try to do is in your communications, whether it's your monthly newsletters or your e-blasts or your social media or on your website, that you start using these words in your messaging, because it's all about planting seeds. You will be generating gifts for the future if you start using these words, because people will recognize your library as a wonderful place for them to think about creating a legacy. Next slide, please. So some of the things that are really critical to successful fundraising, this is probably not a surprise to any of you, but I just wanted to be a reminder. You really need to have a fundraising plan. At Wood Library, we start developing our budget for the following year in September. I usually have a pretty good sense of what the needs are going to be for the library. We have a strategic plan. So by the end of October, I'm developing my fundraising plan for the following year. You also can do multi-year fundraising plans. For example, if you know that you're going to be going into a capital campaign or you have a special initiative that you need to fund. But the most important thing that I want to say here is that whatever plan you develop, it does not have to be complex, but it really should include consideration of all these different aspects. And it should include support and buy-in from every member of your leadership team, the director, your board of trustees. If you're fortunate enough, like Wood Library, to have a professional fundraiser on board, that's wonderful. If you have a fundraising committee of volunteers, all of those key players should be involved in helping to develop and support the fundraising plan from year to year. It's important to understand what your library's needs are and to tie your goals to your needs. And the other thing I wanted to mention from this slide is that you do need a budget to execute your fundraising plans. And I'm sure that, especially in these times when we're all working on contingency budgets or working under contingency budgets, which may go into 2021, you do need to have some resources, financial resources, to execute whatever fundraising plans that you have, whether it be an annual appeal or a fundraising event or some cultivation activities or producing a newsletter, whatever it is. That money can't come out of the programming budget. You need to have a line in your budget for fundraising. And that would be true if you're working from a friend's budget as well as if you're working from a library budget. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just touch upon the different types of fundraising tactics that you could employ at your library, with special emphasis on the two bookends, the annual fund drive and charitable plan giving. Really, your annual fund drive or your annual appeal or your membership drive, whatever it is that you want to call it, it's an annual solicitation of people in your community who support the library for operating funds. And over time, as you do this annual fund drive, you will build a base of support that can then be used to be successful with other types of fundraising. So I have been working at Wood Library since 2006. And when I first started at Wood Library, the annual fund drive was generating about $40,000 a year. There also was an honor and memorial fund, but we really were not doing any other type of fundraising. I think they were doing like a chicken barbecue every once in a while, and they were doing book sales. But we have managed to really develop our annual fund drive so that we are sending out multiple appeals a year. Our fund drive is really front and center of all of the messaging that we do at the library, whether it be an e-blast or on our website, in our newsletters, certainly our solicitations. And the fund drive donors just provide a wonderful source or pool of people who are going to support you in all of the other activities that you're doing in fundraising. specifically charitable plan giving, because they will make up your best prospects for charitable plan giving. Next slide, please. I wanted to share this slide with you about Wood Library's budgeted revenue for 2019, because I think it is illustrative of why it's so important for our library and libraries like yours to be consistently raising funds from individuals. So as you can see here, about 70% of our budget comes from a tax levy, what we call community-based funding. And we raise about 25% of the annual revenue from donations and fundraising and endowment income. So you can see why it's so important for us to be constantly thinking about fundraising and trying different approaches to generate revenue from donations for our library. Because without that income, we wouldn't be able to provide the services and programs that we are known for at Wood Library. Certainly because of the tax cap limitations, we know that community-based funding is not going to grow. I have talked to my board quite a bit about that we have probably maxed out on our fund drive. We raise around $100,000 a year from our fund drive. I think that's what our community can support. But the one knob that we really have to turn is our endowment, because we can use the income from our endowment to apply to the operating budget every year. So if we're growing our endowment, we have more income from the endowment that we can apply to the operations of the library. Okay, next slide. These are some of the fundraising approaches that we have employed at Wood Library recently. There's really two different types. We have organizational efforts, which are really driven by the Board of Trustees and myself as the professional fundraiser on staff. And then we have funds raised by the Friends of Wood Library. And the money that comes from the Friends of Wood Library actually helps to supplement the needs that we have that are outside of our operating budget. So we're really grateful for the work that they're doing. They are a separate 501c3. They are doing their own membership appeal, and then that generates the revenue that we can tap for sponsorships and advocacy efforts. Our efforts from the organization are really focused on making sure that we win the vote every year, the fund drive, and most currently, we're really putting a lot of emphasis into our Legacy Society. All of the other activities are more supplemental activities, but they all are important to our overall fundraising plan. Next slide, please. So let's take a quick break for questions.
So one of the questions we received was if we will be providing the PowerPoint after the session.
Yes, the PowerPoint will be made available, as will the recording. And one thing I wanted to mention about the PowerPoint, thanks to Christina's suggestion, all of the links that will be appear in the second portion of this presentation are live links, which will allow you to dig a little deeper into the work that we're doing at Wood Library and to give you some better examples of the types of information that I'm sharing with you today.
Awesome. Also, Rebecca said hi to you.
Hi, Rebecca.
And then we have
Rebecca's doing great work up in there in Rochester.
Oh, awesome. And then we have another question that just came in. Many libraries are going fine-free. Have you used this to encourage donations? And this comes from Stephen.
Yes, Stephen. Actually, that is quite a debate at Wood Library right now. We have offered fine-free status to any donor who makes a gift of $50 or more to Wood Library to the annual fund drive. And our board is actually leaning toward not assessing fines on overdue materials. And so I am a little bit concerned about that because I do know for a fact that there are many patrons who make that $50 donation knowing that they will not have fines assessed during the year. But I also have a lot of confidence in our community, because every time I think that we're going to face a real hurdle in fundraising, they step up. And I think that's really a credit to the quality programming and services that we continue to provide at Wood Library.
Awesome. We have one more question that came in. Hi, Maria. It's Jessica from Victor. Do you have any good resources to help me become more versed in handling charitable gifts? Those that aren't simple bequests can get complicated.
Yes, we're going to look at that in the second part of this presentation. And if you click on some of the links, you'll get a little bit more information. There is a sample bequest language on our website. And in the webinar, the Wills and Bequests webinar that I attached to this presentation, there's a lot of great information from some local attorneys here in Canandaigua about wills and bequests specifically.
Perfect. I'll give everyone one more minute if you have any other questions about this first part. All right, I don't think any other questions are coming in. Just to make sure, if something does come to mind, we will have another section for questions at the end of the second part of the webinar. So just put them in the questions chat, and I will keep a tab on them. All right, Maria, take it away.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what's the difference between a charitable donation and a planned gift? I'm going to just read a definition for you. A charitable donation is a real-time gift made by an individual to a charity, commonly in the form of cash, appreciated securities, real estate, services, or other assets. Next slide, please. Planned giving is the process of making a significant charitable gift during a donor's life or at death that is part of a personal, financial, or estate plan. So the difference really is that a planned gift requires a commitment to the future financial stability of the library and a desire to leave a legacy for your library. Planned giving also typically requires assistance from a professional, whether it be a trusted attorney or a trusted financial advisor. Planned giving has been part of the fundraising equation forever, but many charities regard the effort as a nice to have, but not need to have activity. Some of the concerns are that the payout on planned gifts are uncertain, and the cultivation and stewardship of these gifts are time consuming. Donors and nonprofits find estate planning intimidating. In fact, many Americans don't have a will because they just don't know how to start. And that's always striking to me because there are, especially today, there are so many opportunities to start that process. And in my experience here in Canandaigua, and I'm sure that it's true in your communities, there are local attorneys who are wonderful to work with and are terrific stewards of your interest as a donor. And so I probably the most important thing we can do as fundraisers for our library is to encourage our supporters to start talking to their trusted advisors about how they want their legacy to look like, and talk to them about going to their attorney and make sure they have a will and that all of their affairs are in order. Really, if there was ever a time for libraries to invest time and resources for cultivating planned gifts, the time is now. And that's because we are experiencing the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. baby boomers will transfer about $30 trillion to the next generation in just a matter of a decade or so. And libraries that are cultivating their supporters now will really reap the benefits in bequests and planned gifts later. So next slide, please. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. This is the technical part of the program, but you can read all of these bullets at another time. I just want to highlight a couple key points. So the most common planned gifts are bequests and beneficiary designation. So bequests are in a will, and that's when you designate a percentage of your estate or a fixed amount to the library. Beneficiary designations are using a retirement asset or a life insurance policy where you name the library in those plans as the beneficiary so that upon the time of your death, the library receives the assets. All of these are tax advantaged approaches. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit more detail about the use of life insurance and retirement assets as a charitable plan giving tool. And again, what I would recommend is that with these different tactics, that you develop some sort of presentation, whether it's a flyer or something on your website, or even a mailing to your most loyal donors, where you just plant the seeds of this information in their minds, so that when the time comes when they're actually considering a legacy, when they're considering putting their will together, when they're meeting with their legal advisor or financial planner, that they know that your library is ready to accept these types of gifts. You do not need to be an expert at any of these any of these tools. Your role really is to provide information so that people can make good choices and create a legacy for your library. Next slide, please. Annuities, real estate and trusts are other forms of planned gifts that you probably have heard about. All of these types of gifts do require some professional assistance to put together for the donor. And your goal as the library is to be open to these types of gifts. You may want to consider a gift policy. We did this at Wood Library a couple years ago. It became one of the standing policies for the library, where we spent some time. We had a committee of trustees. We had an attorney who was on our board help us with this. We developed some guidelines for what we would accept and what we would not accept in terms of some of these planned gifts. And it's been a great tool for us to use when we're talking with donors. Next slide, please. So who are the best prospects for planned gifts? So I really want you to think beyond just the wealthy people in your community, because the best prospects for planned gifts are all of those individuals, patrons, people in the community who have established ties to your library. Anyone who has an already established relationship with a library is a perfect prospect for planned gift. Anyone who has served in a leadership role for your organization, whether they're a Friends president or member, one of the leadership members, a trustee, a volunteer on a committee, volunteers in the library, all of those people are really good prospects. A particularly good prospect for planned giving is someone who has consistently made gifts to your library or to your friend's organization over a long period of time. We've actually established a new giving society at Wood Library called the Advocates, and those are people who have consistently made gifts over a period of 10 years to Wood Library. And we acknowledge them in our report to the community, and we also invite them to our annual donor appreciation event. They are really great prospects for planned giving. Next slide. So let me tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing at Wood Library and our Legacy Society. Our Legacy Society was established quite a number of years ago by a committee on our board. This is even before I started working at Wood Library, because they wanted to acknowledge bequests that had been made to the library over 100 years. And so they established the Charles Loomis Legacy Society, and it's a giving society. And basically, when people tell us that they have made some sort of designation for Wood Library in their estate plans, we ask them if they want to become members of the Legacy Society in a public way. And then their names are asterisked in our report to the community, and we invite them to special events, and we try to engage them in the library in ways that we might not engage other people, just to acknowledge that special commitment that they made to Wood Library. A couple years ago, in conversations with our board of trustees, I started talking to them about financial sustainability for the library. Given all the work that we had done over a period of about 15 years to really develop our fund drive and some of the other fundraising activities we were doing at the library, I told them that I felt that our fund drive capacity was probably going to max out at around $100,000 a year, and that they should not, when they're doing their budgeting, they should not anticipate more than that in annual revenue, just given the size of our community and all the work that we had done. And the other thing that we were concerned about is the amount of staff time and resources it was taking to do fundraising events, such as our book sales. We have an event called Persapalooza. We were doing a 5K. We were doing a number of other fundraising events. And those also, I believe, have a cap on the kind of revenue that you can expect for your annual operations. But the one knob that I think we have great opportunity in is the endowment. So the value of our endowment right now is about $3.5 million. It's taken a bit of a hit this year, but it's expected to come back. But we can take the income from the endowment to help fund operations. So obviously, the more you grow your endowment, the more income you're going to be able to pull from that to balance out the growth in your operating budget. So we decided to put a lot more energy and resources into cultivating donors for legacy gifts. Next slide, please. So the next series of slides are really examples of the types of things that we're doing at Wood Library to plant those seeds for legacy giving. This is my signature on the emails that I send out to everyone from donors to staff to trustees to community members. And as you can see at the bottom, I have a live link to the library's website, and I have a statement, build a legacy, include Wood Library in your estate plans. So this is my subtle nudge to anyone who gets an email from me to think about Wood Library as they're considering their estate plans. Next slide, please. We do the same thing with our letterhead. This is a little bit hard to see, but at the very bottom of our letterhead, we include that same statement, build a legacy, include Wood Library in your estate plans. Again, anyone that gets any mail from the library on our letterhead is seeing that reminder that they could make a significant lasting gift to the library. Next slide, please. Mention of the Legacy Society is included in our business response envelope. This envelope is what goes into all of our solicitations. It's also in our report to the community, and the envelope is all around the library building. So when people check that box at the bottom, send me information about the Legacy Society, they get a letter from me. Next slide, please. Here's the letter that I send. And it also includes a folder that is full of information about our Legacy Society, various options for charitable plan giving, sample bequest language, and some other information that may be useful to them as they are exploring their possibilities. We also encourage them to talk with their trusted attorney or legal advisor or financial advisor, and then let us know if there's anything more we can do to help them through this process. If anyone would like a sample of this packet of information that I send out to donors, I would be happy to send it to you. Just make sure that you send me an email after this presentation. Next slide, please. So a new initiative for 2020 was to do a series of information and educational programs on charitable plan giving, and we call this Legacy Series 2020. So when we first devised this concept, we were still open to the public, and I scheduled these 3 programs. The first one was done very successfully in February, in person at the library. Next slide, please. We sent a letter to all of our donors at the beginning of February, the donors who made gifts of $250 or more, to let them know about the series and invite them to the first presentation in February. Next slide, please. We also send out a postcard. This is actually the mail side of the postcard. This was sent to all donors, and this postcard was specifically promoting gifts from individual retirement accounts, but also promoting our Legacy series. One point I want to make about all of these products that I'm showing you is that they were all designed in-house using Canva by me, and I have absolutely no experience in graphic design, but Canva makes it look easy and professional. So if you don't have Canva at your library, please look into that and use it. It's a wonderful design tool, and it saves you a lot of money from having to work with designers. We did mail this using a mail house, and they also did the printing. Next slide, please. This is the back of the postcard. Again, you can see that we were promoting gifts from your individual retirement account, which was the first topic of our Legacy series for 2020. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot from the Wills and Bequests program that we did, which was also part of the Legacy series. This had to be done virtually using the Zoom webinar feature, but we lined up 3 local attorneys who were our panelists. They did an amazing job. They were so professional, so well informed on the topic of wills and bequests, and made us look really good. The full webinar is available on this link, and I do encourage you to watch it when you have a chance, because they did a really terrific job of describing how people can use wills and bequests to create a legacy. Next slide, please. This was another example of a postcard we mailed out last fall. 2019 was Wood Library's 160th anniversary year. So we did use the word legacy and future and all of that a lot in all of our messaging. This particular postcard was mailed to all of our donors and really was encouraging people to think about securing the library's future by making a charitable plan gift. And we really were pushing bequests and designating Wood Library as a beneficiary of a retirement fund or insurance policy. So we did that in all of our platforms, whether it was the newsletter, social media, and then of course this direct mail piece. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This again, this was all created in Canva. This was the ad that we placed in the October newsletter last year. It supplemented the mailing that went out. Also, we printed extra postcards to have around the library for people to pick up when they were in the building. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot from our most recent report to the community. This is a page in the report that's dedicated to promotion of our Legacy Society. And I do have a link here that's live where you can look at the full report to the community. And I just would really encourage you to use the report or any opportunity that you have for storytelling, to share all of the wonderful examples of how your library is impacting your community, because it's through those impactful services and programs that people feel inspired to make a legacy gift to your library. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot from our website. We do have a full page on our website dedicated to the Legacy Society. You can see here we do have some sample bequest language there, and you can see the full page of that web page on that link. Next slide, please. In late 2018, we started holding some cultivation events that were hosted by library trustees at their homes. And we started inviting small groups of library supporters to these very intimate, informal gatherings at people's homes. We would ask the trustees to help us come up with the invitation list. The bulk of the invitation list were people who they knew, so because we figured that the donors or people in the community would actually come to their home because they weren't strangers. We limited the number of invitations to about 30, so these were very intimate gatherings. The library director was present, as was a couple of the librarians and myself, but the trustee who was hosting the party did most of the speaking. The speaking part of the party was very limited, about 10-15 minutes. Most of the gathering was really an opportunity for us to get to know who our donors were and for them to ask us about the library in a very informal way. And these were just really wonderful events. And I think that we will probably be reaping the benefits of these events in the future. Next slide, please. Finally, and this is my last slide, other than the glossary, I just want to remind you how important stewardship is in this entire process of cultivating charitable plan gifts. People need to trust that you are going to be responsible for their significant gift, even after their death. So all of the things that you put into place to ensure that trust are really important. It's important to acknowledge gifts in a timely manner, just gifts to your annual fund drive. Any gift that comes into your library, you need to acknowledge that. The acknowledgement should come from the director. And trustees can get involved in making thank you calls and also sending thank you notes to donors. Just regular communication is so important. People want to know that their gifts are being used in a way that is impactful and makes a difference in people's lives. And anytime we use social media or send an email or send a mailing or do a newsletter, we can tell those stories. Keep your donors engaged and involved in your organization. And I promise you that when it comes time for them to think about their legacy, they will think about your library. Next slide. So we included a glossary of terms on this presentation for those of you who this may be really new information. This is not an all-inclusive list. I'm sure there are lots more terms that I talked about that are not included here. Please, if you have any questions after this presentation about anything that I spoke about today, I would be more than happy to talk with you by phone, have an email back and forth. I even have been known to go visit with other library leaders to talk about fundraising. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share this information with you. And at this time, we'll take some questions.
Hello. Okay. So, Ashley says, we do not have a dedicated fundraiser on staff and we need to create a development plan. What resources would you recommend to get started?
Well, I think probably maybe the best thing that you could do is to talk with some of the library directors who have dedicated development professionals or have been really engaged in fundraising, to get some idea from them about how they got started, what worked, what didn't work, what worked and didn't work. I think that there are a lot of great resources available in terms of what's involved with starting an annual fundraising effort and how you can develop a plan. But I think libraries for a long time have relied on public funding. And so the whole idea of cultivating donors for the long haul and having professionals on staff who can help with fundraising, that's not a common thing. It's an aberration. Rebecca would probably concur. When I first started my job at Wood Library, I was the only fundraising professional for I didn't even find anyone else until I looked at New York Public Library, and that their operation was so different from what we could ever possibly do in Canandaigua. But I actually learned a lot from just looking at their website, and I reached out to anyone that I could find that was doing fundraising at libraries. And I learned a lot in the early years because I had come from a background where there was quite a tradition of having professional fundraisers on staff, not at libraries, but in other nonprofit environments where there was a strong budget for fundraising. And so I really had to self-advocate and self-learn. And so I am very happy to talk with anyone who is interested in developing a fundraising plan at their library and talking to your board or leadership group about the importance of investing in a professional to help you.
Our next question is from Jean. Is it possible to share a copy of your gift acceptance policy?
Yes, absolutely. Christina, if you could remind me about that. Thank you.
Write that down. Gift acceptance. Okay, perfect. Our next question is from Rebecca. What are some special things you do for the Legacy Society members?
Yes, so they are all listed in the report to the community with an asterisk by their name. They are invited to our annual donor appreciation event. And we also do, one thing I did not put in this presentation, but I'll tell you about because it's been really successful. We started holding an annual Breakfast with the Librarians activity in the fall, and we invited all of our Legacy Society members and our top tier donors to come for a very small, intimate gathering, continental breakfast style event at Wood Library before the library was open in the morning. And we did it sort of like a round robin with each library. We have 3 librarians, and so the librarians would sit at a table with about 10 donors around the table, and they would talk about the activities that they were doing for the community and for patrons. And then the librarians would rotate about every 15 minutes so that the donors got to hear directly from the librarians about the impact of their giving. And our donors have loved this. They love the personal attention. We actually have had people write checks while they're sitting there and give them to our director. I mean, it's been such an amazing event, very low cost. I go to Wegmans and I get some Danishes and juice and some fruit, and it's held at the library. It's nothing fancy, but they love the attention. The other thing that we have been doing a lot of, especially right now during the pandemic, is the trustees have been calling all of our legacy donors and our, we've actually called anybody who made a gift of $100 or more. We've been making these calls. We're not quite done yet, but we're just checking in with people, touching base, giving them an update on the library if they're interested in hearing about that. And just, you know, that regular communication, that personalized communication is really, really important to cultivating them for the long haul. That's what we do.
Awesome. Ashley had a question too. She says, how do you determine fundraising goals? Our county executive said a fundraiser should raise 2 to 3 times their salary in a year.
First of all, fundraising professionals need to focus on what are the needs of the organization. And that's really how you drive the fundraising goal. And it's fundraising professionals don't set the goal, the board sets the goal, or the Friends leaders set the goal. We execute the plan, we provide recommendations, but the goal has to be driven by the needs of the organization. So if you have a $100,000 budget and you look at all the ways that you typically would bring in revenue and you have a shortfall there or a gap, then the fundraising goal has to be that gap or better. That's what I would say to that question.
And also Caroline had a question. What percentage of the anticipated revenue do you budget for fundraising expenses?
We don't do it that way. I have had a $5,000 budget for years. The library director asked me, what do you need to execute our plan? And I tell her, it's not based on a percentage of the goal. It's not based on my salary or anything like that. It's really what can I get for $5,000 and still meet our goals. Actually,
Maria, are you still there? Maria, I think we lost your audio. Please hold all. Getting in touch with Maria. Maria, can you hear us? That is weird. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't know why the audio isn't working on my end. Maria, can you put your answer to everyone in the chat for that last question? And then we can close up the webinar. I apologize for the inconvenience, everyone. Show answered questions. The question was, what percentage of the anticipated revenue do you budget for fundraising expenses? Once Maria puts that in the chat, I will read the answer out loud and then we will conclude the webinar. Thank you so much for participating. And thank you for your patience. Maria's answer to the question that reads, what percentage of the anticipated revenue do you budget for fundraising expenses? Her answer is, we do not base it on the percentage of revenue. I discuss the fundraising expenses needs with the library director every year. The number has been static for several years. It is really based on what I can do with a limited amount of funds. The amount is currently $5,000. Thank you so much, Maria. And we just had one last question, just asking, will you please provide Maria's email? I just went to the next slide, which has Maria's email right here at the bottom, as well as all her contact information. And that concludes. Oh, and Maria just said, thank you everyone for participating. Please reach out to me after this presentation if you have more questions. Be well and good luck. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, Maria, for hosting this amazing webinar. Thank you to the Friends of Library section for hosting and having this wonderful idea. And that concludes the webinar. We will share the presentation, the gift acceptance policy, and the PowerPoint, and also a full recording of this webinar. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.